Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we're talking all things Colorado Rockies. We've got a fun show in store. We're talking concepts, ideas, different things, all in the name of Colorado Rockies. And to start, let's talk about Tyler Freeman. Thomas Harding just had a pretty interesting article come out about Freeman and really kind of taking on that leadership role. And there's different pieces that I found interesting that really quickly want to touch on. The first of which is how he wants to put this positive spin on Rockies baseball. He has a quote. What we implied to those young guys in helping their mindset was that it's not okay we were losing games. Freeman said, it was like we know you guys were rookies, we're teaching the right way to play, but this year coming up, it's go time. There's not going to be that learning curve. We're going to play Rockies baseball, and we'll be ready to win some ball games. And it just goes into the theme what we've heard from some of these other players. And we're going to touch on it a little bit later where Jake McCarthy said, hey, this team is hungry. Kyle Freeland said, hey, I really like that we're getting different ideas in this clubhouse. Hunter Goodman essentially was saying, hey, I've got a bad taste in my mouth, and I want us to win. And so it really feels like this team has taken 2025 and said, hey, this is not going to be the norm. Now, it's one thing to say, it's another to actually do, but it is encouraging, right? It is important for a team's culture to have these guys that aren't going to just kind of say, hey, you know what, we stink and we're going to stink, right? Like, you'd much rather have guys believe in the opportunity of winning and winning baseball games. And so it's just an encouraging article to hear from Freeman and to really just embrace the role, right? And we'll, actually in the next segment, we'll touch on even that trade with Nolan Jones, which happened right before the season, that Freeman has really flourished as a Rocky. He hit 281 in 110 games, which is honestly one of the more positive stories for the Rockies. Article talks about how one of the big things is he's also working on his health and how he's really trying to hone in, in the offseason, different ways to ensure that he's on the field more, right? Because he did miss time. And he's had an oblique injury that he is trying to really make sure doesn't pop up in 2026. But one of the interesting things, too, is Paul DePodesta kind of talked about how Freeman can play in a lot of different positions, in the outfield, in the infield. He's played a couple of games at first base, which I like that note got sprinkled in there, because that's one of the things we've talked about is, the Rockies have, they just brought in Willie Castro, who's a utility guy, who can play multiple positions, and so can Freeman. And I think the question at first base of should the Rockies sign, should the Rockies not sign, I think Freeman has a real opportunity to be the starting first baseman on opening day. And I think he's going to play. He's going to get a lot of opportunities to play. The outfield is a little more loaded, but hey, first base is wide open. And, you put Castro at second, Freeman at first, Tovar at short, and Karros probably gets the nod at third, and that's actually pretty competent infield, defensively speaking, right? And that's important, just because of the struggles we saw at times last year. So I think, that's a real opportunity for Freeman, but he can really play anywhere. If a guy needs a day off, if there's injuries, like having someone that can be a bit of a Swiss Army knife is a big deal. And you have two of those in Castro and Freeman. Freeman, I'm really excited for the 2026 season. And the closer we get, the more in my head I'm just thinking about just the different opportunities. Because 2026 is going to be a hard year. There's going to be struggles, but there are also going to be some really positive things that you'll be able to take away from. And guys like Tyler Freeman are one of those that, you really look forward to how he can develop or to grow more in this system. Because once he got the nod and put to the top of the lineup, that's where he really started to flourish, right? So OPS was over .750 as like last 100 games. That's where he started really, really shine at the plate. So Freeman is an exciting prospect, and not a prospect as like he's a 20-year-old guy. Prospect in the means of, hey, he's going to give you a lot of different advantages in terms of where you can play him, and his availability. If he gets that up, I think he's going to be a really big bright spot for the Rockies in 2026. And it's interesting. We go from talking about Freeman to trade ideas and different things in the offseason. And look, this is not my idea. This is not something that I agree with or approve upon. But it was interesting as I was, sleuthing, digging through the internet. I came across a Newsweek article that essentially proposed a trade from a big Red Sox network or show that talked about trading Ezequiel Tovar for 3 Red Sox prospects. The prospects are Justin Gonzalez, Juan Valera, and Tyler Uberstein. I might not be saying that last name correctly, but regardless, you get it. 3 prospects, none of which are in the top 100 MLB rankings for top 100. There are a couple of top 30 prospects in the Red Sox system. And ultimately, I would obviously not do this deal, but it did get me thinking of, as the prompt says, what would it take for the Rockies to actually trade a star? And when is the right time to actually make a trade? Because, in a trade like this, I actually think the Rockies would be selling low on Tovar. 2025 wasn't his best year, and thus, maybe some of that value just goes down a little, but his contract is great. He is a young and has great potential to be a star in this league. Defensively, he's awesome. And again, I would not trade Tovar. I would not trade Goodman. I would not trade Dollander unless there is an offer that presents itself that makes a ton of sense. And that's really kind of the focus on this subject is, how do you know when to actually make deals? And the Rockies have had a couple of trades in the last couple of years that you can look to and say, hey, that was a good deal, or that might not have been the best deal. Obviously, the Nolan Jones trade is a great example of a good trade, right? Nolan Jones gave you a great year, and then he struggled a little, and then you trade him for Freeman. And at the time, I know I was in the camp of saying, why are we trading Nolan Jones? Dude, this guy's going to figure it out. He's going to be fine. In reality, Jones really struggled again in 2025. He didn't play a ton either. And Freeman, as we just talked about, really one of the bright spots in taking on a leadership role. And that's where you got really solid value, where if you hold on to Jones and he continues to slide, you're probably not going to get the same value at the deadline or in the 25 offseason, 25-26 offseason. You look at the Ryan McMahon trade, I think that's a trade where the Rockies held on to McMahon for a little too long. And might not have gotten as much value as they possibly could have if they had traded him a year prior. And so that kind of goes into all of it. Then there's the biggest example of the Nolan Arenado trade, which we've touched on, which was just downright a really terrible trade. There was obviously the fear he'd opt out and go play somewhere else. But what you got out of that deal really was not much. Austin Gomber being the only contributing player at a major league level. And contributing really isn't much because of all the struggles he had at Coors Field. So then you look at, we kind of go back to like Tovar and Goodman and some of these other young players. You really want to hold on to them because none of their value is going to be the value that you would want to trade for, right? Trading McMahon made sense because he was a little bit older, and you're probably not going to get some of those big prospect pieces that you'll see from teams making deals. But for like a Tovar, a Goodman, Dolan, all guys who are young, even Britton Doyle is young. You want to make sure what you're getting in return helps your rebuild. You don't want to just trade for guys just to be guys, right? Like looking at some of those Red Sox prospects in the deal that was presented, that's not to say they won't contribute. I think Justin Gonzalez probably has the most value of those 3 right now. But it just wouldn't make sense. Like, you just wouldn't trade Tovar for just 3 names. Like, that doesn't make sense as an organization that's trying to grow, that's trying to develop some of these pieces. If Tovar has a great 2025 or 2026, you probably don't deal him in general just because, like, hey, this is our star. This is who we're building around. But if you were to trade him, you absolutely need to get a haul of a top 100 prospect at the bare minimum. Right? So, like, if you were in a trade with the Boston Red Sox, I don't even say the Red Sox would want to do this, or the Rockies, right? Like, I don't think the Rockies want to make a deal for their young star right now. But if you were to trade someone, you're probably looking at, like, they have 21-year-old Kyson Witherspoon, who's number 84 in their system. They have a couple pitchers that are now at the major league level that are probably too expensive in Peyton Toll and Connolly Early. Could also look at shortstop Franklin Arias. Regardless, the whole point of this is less about, hey, the Rockies should go and trade, but it's more about when do the Rockies want to make trades? Because they're probably going to make trades during the course of this rebuild. And the overall important piece is you want to squeeze as much value as you possibly can for the guys that you have. And the guys that you're probably trading aren't going to be these younger assets unless you get a really important haul in return. Instead, you're probably going to be trading maybe some of these older, more established players to a team that's making a push where maybe you don't get as strong of prospects, right? Like, if Moniak has a really strong 26 and teams are desperate for an outfielder at the deadline, you look to shop him, right? And you look to see what you can get in return and really try to squeeze the most out of that value there. But ultimately, I saw that deal, and it got my wheels turning of what would the Rockies actually want to do in terms of trading some of their players? What would they trade players for? And for their younger guys, I would stay away from really making any deals, especially after a 25 season where a lot of their top end value dipped. So making a deal right now doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't help you because you don't have the same value that you would have if you waited maybe through 2026 and watched them kind of come out of some of the slumps that we saw, right? Hunter Goodman obviously having the most value of any of the guys the Rockies have just because of how good his 25 was. Potential value, you look at like Tovar or someone like that. But again, I wouldn't make these trades. So if you're a Rockies fan, which you probably are if you're here, put down your pitchforks because I'm with you. I don't want to trade Tovar. I don't want to trade Goodman. I just saw an article online. I said, that's interesting. Don't do it. Anywho, if the Rockies do make trades, bump up the value before making a deal because you don't want to look back and regret a move where you just didn't get enough value out of who you dealt. So that was kind of the thought of just talking about that. We're in the off season. We're in kind of different trade rumors and everything like that. But one of the interesting things that we heard over this past week, Jake McCarthy said this team is hungry and they are ready. And this segment's not going to be super long, but it just got me thinking, what does a hungry team look like? A hungry team that only won 43 games, that is arguably in the toughest division in baseball. What does that actually look like? And what are benchmarks for the Rockies in 2026? Because they will look different than any other team in the division, right? A lot of teams in the NL West have the aspiration to make the playoffs and to win a World Series. And the Rockies aren't there yet. I think their benchmarks are having key development from players, is to win games, right? Like, I think we've noted this number, but like winning 60 games shouldn't be a crazy thought, right? Like, how as a team can you play to avoid another 100 loss season? That's not a crazy benchmark to have. And that's what you're hearing from all these players is, hey, we want to stop the bleeding on the losing of this team. And so those are questions for players, for performance. What do you want to see out of coaching? What is the leash on a guy like Warren Schaefer, who is now getting his first full season with the Rockies? What's the expectation there? And what is the leash that this front office has on someone like Warren Schaefer. And for him, wins and losses are important, but is building a culture more important and building that foundation more important? The answer is obviously yes. Like you want to make sure that you're building something. And for Josh Burns and Paul De Podesta, how do you even like review that? How do you know, like, hey, we like what Schaefer is building here. We like some of the different tools and the different teachings that we're seeing that are developing these players. So that is kind of the interesting question when questions that you ask yourself when you see a comment of, hey, this team is hungry. I don't think any Rockies fan sees that and like, they're going to win 90 games this year, baby. The team is back, baby. I think more so, hey, this team is looking to improve and jump from a season that everyone in Rockies fandom wants to forget. But it was interesting. It is interesting to see a guy come in and say, hey, well, there are guys who really, really want to succeed. And that's just been kind of the vibe we've gotten all off season from some of the different comments. Chase Dollander had mentioned that he's really looking to make a jump. A lot of these guys really want to forget 2025, and I think that's refreshing as fans to hear after just how dismal of a season it was. And then I figured we'd end the show. I say, who's the ability to become a superstar? In reality, who just has the best potential on this team? Who is the ability to actually become a star in this league? And the ability to essentially, like, look, Nolan Arenado is pinnacle, right? And I'm not saying any of these guys will be at that grade of a player, but how do you have high level talent? How do you develop that high level talent, right? And how do you keep it? And the Rockies have a few guys. Obviously, I'm going to focus mainly on just active roster right now. I think this segment could just be me starting it saying, Ethan Holiday, hit end of the show, and we call it a day. But that's not obviously the purpose of this. It's more so just kind of talking about some of the guys that the Rockies have right now on the active roster and what that looks like in terms of overall potential, because they do have some younger pieces. They have a lot of younger pieces, but they have a few that are really interesting when it comes to development and what they can become. Ezequiel Tovar, who we've already talked about, is one of those guys. Defensively, he's extremely solid. 2024, he had a really, really strong year at the plate. In 25, that dipped a little. I think the biggest concern for Tovar is just some of his ability to get on base when it comes to drawing walks, and his strikeout rate. In 23 and 24, he was in the lower part of the league when it came to drawing walks. And I think that's going to be a big coaching challenge for someone like Brett Pill, for not just Tovar, but for this team, is the ability to really, really have these guys fix that whiff rate and fix just how much their swing rate. We talked about it. They were first in baseball, or top 2 in baseball in strikeout rate and whiff rate, and a lot of categories you don't want to be first in. And so for this team, that will be important, especially for Tovar, because there's obviously important details there. And looking at some of his other stats here, he's okay when it comes to hard hit balls. His best stat, though, is just overall his defensive ability. He's a really strong fielder. Hunter Goodman is another player you obviously think of, and he's fun because he's really kind of come from nowhere, right? 2025 was such a huge breakout year for him. His biggest question is just defense, right? Some of the guys I'm mentioning, they all have a big question. And Hunter Goodman's is just going to be, will he become a strong defensive catcher, right? At the plate, he's great. His swing speed is great. He hits the absolute piss out of a baseball, right? So that there aren't too many questions there. I think the biggest question is just, can he continue to replicate the success that he had at the plate? But defensively, how do you become a solid catcher? I think it's why when the MLB came out with their top 100 players, he was in the 90s. But I think he can rise from that. It's just defensively, how can he be better? I think offensively he can improve. Some of those numbers can improve just because, hopefully the Rockies can get more guys on base for him. And so that top of the lineup should be better this year, which means it should improve some of Goodman's stats in terms of like RBIs and everything like that. And then Chase Dollander, I think, is a third guy in terms of just top-end talent for the Rockies. His big question is just how can he pitch at Coors Field? And some of it is just less about his talent and more about where he plays, because his fastball velocity and everything like that is top end. It's extremely talented. But his movement and his pitches and everything like that struggle at Coors Field. And so that's where he has mentioned, hey, I am looking to improve and be ready for the 2026 season. Fourth guy is Brenton Doyle. He's interesting. He's a little bit older, but when it comes defensively, there is no one better on the team. He is by far the best defensive player on this team. He's phenomenal in the outfield. And I do think we should see a big bounce back year at the plate for Doyle. There were off the field stuff that was going on that would probably affect anyone, and you just hope for Doyle, right? Like 2026 can be a great year for him at the plate, especially with the different trade rumors and everything swirling. You just cheer on a guy like that. So those are the four. I would say overall it's still Tovar, just a young shortstop that still has really great potential. But I don't think you could go wrong picking any of those four guys in terms of just overall potential and what they can become. Dollander, I feel like, is the most limited, not because of his talent, but more so just where he is. And it's just kind of the age-old song, playing for the Rockies and pitching for the Rockies. But regardless, this show has gone on way too long. When I started recording, I'm like, this might go 12 to 15 minutes. We're at the 22-minute mark, so it's a good time to end it. But if you enjoy shows like this, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe. If you like just some of the different outside the box comments, if you want more different trade ideas, if you want anything like that, please leave a comment below. If you said, man, those trade ideas sucked, or you have no idea what you're talking about, leave a comment. And honestly, feedback of any sort really helps out, helps grow the show, helps me just produce different segments for the show. So anywho, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.